Welcome back in the deep dive. You mentioned being drawn to those mysterious places.
Yeah,
And Lake Lanier is almost overflowing with mystery. It's not just the disappearances and the stories,
right?
but there's something about it that feels off.
Oh, yeah.
So let's dive in.
Yeah, let's start with some context.
Okay.
Lake Lanier is a man-made reservoir. It was created back in the 1950s,
Oh, wow.
and to create it, they actually flooded over 50,000 acres in Georgia. We're not just talking about empty land.
Oh, wow.
This was a network of towns. There were homes and farms and churches.
Oh, my gosh.
Even cemeteries were swallowed up by the water.
Cemeteries.
And there are rumors that not all the graves were relocated properly.
Really?
So potentially thousands of souls are still resting beneath the surface.
It's not just a construction project, then. It's like a complete reshaping of the landscape and the history.
It is,
It makes you wonder, does the place hold on to its past?
right?
Especially when it comes to something as permanent as death?
It's a question that haunts a lot of cultures, isn't it? This idea that a place can hold on to a kind of energy, especially a place associated with death, and that energy might express itself in ways that we don't fully understand.
So we've got this submerged history, a landscape that's been literally reshaped, and then you layer on top of that over 700 recorded deaths since the lake was created.
Yeah,
That's a chilling statistic.
it is.
Is that typical for a lake this size?
Not at all. And what makes it even more unsettling is the nature of these deaths. These weren't all inexperienced swimmers or reckless boaters.
Right.
Many were strong swimmers familiar with the lake, and the circumstances are often just inexplicable.
Okay, so what kind of circumstances are we talking about?
Well, there are reports of boats capsizing in perfectly calm waters. No sudden gusts of wind, no rogue waves, just a sudden flip.
Wow.
And then there are accounts from survivors who describe this force dragging them down, even in shallow areas.
Oh, God.
Other people talk about this sense of panic, like a feeling of dread that washes over them as soon as they enter the water. It's as if the lake itself is rejecting them.
That goes right to the heart of what's so eerie about this place, right? We're not just talking about accidents. It feels intentional.
Right.
Almost like something is pulling people down.
Yeah,
Which brings us to the graveyard effect, right?
exactly. That's the idea. The spirits of those displaced by the flooding, those whose final resting places were disturbed, they might be lashing out. It's a belief that's really rooted in folklore and this human need to find meaning in tragedy.
So how does this graveyard effect actually manifest? What are people experiencing?
Well, there are countless local reports of ghostly figures on the shoreline figures that vanish when you try to approach them.
Oh, wow.
Some claim to hear whispers coming from the water, almost like voices trying to break through the surface.
That's creepy.
It's those little details, those whispers of the past intruding on the present that really send chills down your spine.
It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie.
It does.
Is there a specific story that really embodies this whole graveyard effect?
Oh, there's one that's become almost legendary, the story of the Lady of the Lake. In 1958, 2 women died in a car crash that plunged into the lake. One body was found almost immediately, but the other one, she remained missing for 31 years.
Wait, 31 years? And then what happened?
Her body was finally recovered in 1989, and here's where it gets really strange. Despite being submerged for decades, her body was remarkably well preserved,
Oh my God.
almost as if the lake itself had chosen to keep her.
That's creepy. I mean, I know bodies decompose differently in water, but 3 decades, that's a long time.
It is.
So what's the connection to this Lady of the Lake?
Well, ever since that discovery, boaters have reported seeing a woman in a blue dress. She appears along the shoreline, often in the evening mist, and then vanishes.
So we've got potential hauntings, ghostly figures, a vanishing lady in a blue dress. It's hard to separate the lake from the legend at this point.
It is, and that's what makes Lake Lanier so fascinating. It's a place where history and mystery collide, but, not everyone believes in the supernatural. Some folks point to more earthly explanations for these strange occurrences.
Okay, so we focus a lot on the spooky side of things, but what about the more practical explanations? Could there be something about the lake itself, something about how it was created that contributes to these tragedies?
Absolutely. Remember, the creation of Lake Lanier was rushed. They flooded this enormous area, and that meant a lot of existing structures ended up underwater. We're not just talking about trees and debris, but entire buildings. Roads, even bridges, are now beneath the surface.
So you're saying the lake bed is essentially an obstacle course.
Pretty much.
I could see how that could explain some boating accidents.
Oh, definitely. A submerged tree trunk could snag a propeller or capsize a boat.
Easily.
And for swimmers, it's even more dangerous.
Yeah.
You could get tangled in submerged barbed wire or caught in the wreckage of a collapsed building. It would lead to panic disorientation and ultimately drowning.
That makes a lot of sense. And because the lake floor is so uneven, it makes recovering bodies incredibly difficult.
Very difficult.
That's a much more concrete explanation than, say, a ghostly hand dragging someone down. But does it account for those reports of feeling pulled under in calm water? Or the boats flipping over without warning?
It might. You see, Lake Lanier is notorious for its poor visibility.
Okay.
There's a lot of decaying matter, which creates this murky, almost sludge-like consistency.
Oh, yeah.
Divers often report near-zero visibility just a few feet below the surface.
So if you can't see what's below you, even in shallow water, it would be easy to panic.
Right.
You might feel something brush against your leg and think it's a hand grabbing you, or your boat could hit a submerged object and tip over before you even realize what happened.
Exactly. And then there's one more factor that we have to consider, and a lot of people underestimate this. It's the temperature of the water.
I'm guessing it's colder than people expect.
It is. Lake Lanier is deep, and the deeper you go, the colder it gets. This can trigger what's called a cold shock response.
Okay, so what exactly is a cold shock response? Is that like hypothermia?
It's a bit different. Hypothermia sets in gradually, but cold shock is immediate. Imagine jumping into what you think is a refreshingly cool lake. But then you're hit with a wave of icy water. Your body goes into shock. Your breathing becomes erratic. Your muscles seize up, and you can lose control of your limbs.
That sounds terrifying and incredibly dangerous if you're already in deep water.
It can be fatal, even for strong swimmers. That sudden loss of muscle control can make it impossible to stay afloat. And because it happens so quickly, there's often no time to call for help.
So we've got the graveyard effect with its whispers and ghostly figures, and then we have these more scientific explanations, the treacherous terrain, the murky water, the dangers of cold shock response. It's like two completely different ways of looking at the same mystery.
And that's the heart of what we're exploring here, isn't it? Is there truly something sinister lurking beneath the surface of Lake Lanier? Or are we just grappling with this very human need to find explanations for things that frighten us?
It's a great question, and it seems like we need to go a bit deeper to answer it. But before we do, I want to hear from you. What are your initial thoughts on all of this?
It's one thing to talk about theories and statistics, but to really get a sense of what makes Lake Lanier so unsettling, we need to look at specific cases.
Yeah, the human stories, I think those individual experiences reveal a lot more than any scientific analysis.
Absolutely.
Do you have a case in mind that really illustrates this?
There are many, but there's one that always stands out. It involves a young girl who drowned back in the 1990s.
Okay.
She was swimming with some friends, a strong swimmer, by all accounts. The water was calm, no signs of trouble. Then she simply vanished beneath the surface.
Just gone. No struggle, no cries for help.
Exactly. Her friend said it was as if she was pulled under. Search teams spent days looking for her. Eventually, her body was found miles from where she disappeared, tangled in submerged trees.
That's heartbreaking. And the fact that her body was found so far away and tangled in debris, it makes it hard not to think about that uneven lake bed we talk about. It sounds like a tragic accident waiting to happen.
It does. But there are other cases where the circumstances are even more baffling. Victims often experience swimmers drowning in seemingly calm waters with no explanation. Some were found entangled in debris, but others remain missing to this day.
It's like the lake itself becomes a character in these stories.
Right.
Almost like a malevolent force.
And that's where those supernatural explanations, like the graveyard effect, really gain traction. When logic fails to provide answers, our minds often turn to the realm of the unexplained.
Right.
We seek patterns, connections, even if those connections exist only in the realm of belief.
So true.
Like the Lady of the Lake story.
Right.
Whether it's a genuine haunting or a case of mistaken identity, the legend persists. It adds another layer of mystique to the lake.
You know, speaking of legends, when I was prepping for our deep dive, I came across some mentions of a haunted bridge near a submerged town called Oscarville. Have you heard about this bridge?
I have. It's said to be haunted by the spirit of a man who was lynched there in the early 20th century.
Oh, wow.
The story goes that he was wrongly accused of a crime and met a brutal end at the hands of a mob.
That's terrible.
Now they say his ghostly figure appears on the bridge at night, especially when there's fog.
It's like a reminder that Lake Lanier holds more than just submerged buildings. It holds submerged histories, too.
It does.
Histories marked by violence and injustice.
Right.
It's almost as if the lake is holding on to those memories, those echoes of the past, refusing to let them fade. It makes you wonder, are the tragedies that happen on Lake Lanier just accidents, or could they be influenced by those layers of history?
It's a compelling thought, isn't it? The idea that the past can bleed into the present, shaping the events that unfold on the surface. But it's also important to remember that stories, especially ghost stories, often evolve over time.
Right.
Details get embellished, facts get mixed with fiction, and the line between reality and folklore becomes blurred.
So how do we navigate that blurred line? As explorers of the unexplained, how do we separate genuine mystery from myth?
I think we have to approach it with a blend of curiosity and skepticism.
Okay,
We ask questions, we examine the evidence, and we consider all possible explanations, both natural and supernatural.
right.
And we also acknowledge that some mysteries may never be fully solved. And that's okay. Sometimes the not knowing is what makes a place truly captivating.
You've touched on something really important there, the power of the unknown. I think that's a big part of what draws people to Lake Lanier. It's not just the beauty of the place, it's the sense that there's something more, something lurking beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively.
Exactly. And that sense of mystery can have a profound impact on the people who live near the lake, who visit it, who are drawn to its beauty, but also aware of its darker side.
It's like living with a constant sense of unease, knowing that this beautiful, serene place also holds a dark history and a potential for danger. I imagine it would be hard not to feel that weight, especially if you believe in the supernatural.
Absolutely. For the communities surrounding Lake Lanier, it's a complex relationship.
Right.
The lake is a source of livelihood, recreation, and beauty, but it's also a constant reminder of the lives lost, the mysteries unsolved, and the ever-present sense of danger that lurks beneath the surface.
It sounds like living near Lake Lanier could be a bit like living in a ghost story, always aware of the unseen forces that might be at play.
Perhaps, and for those who visit, it's a balancing act
Yeah.
between the desire to experience the lake's beauty and the awareness of its darker side. Some might be drawn to the thrill, the adrenaline rush of being in a place with such a haunting reputation.
It's like a real-life horror movie cut.
Right,
It's not real, but you can't help but feel a shiver down your spine when you're there.
precisely. But others might approach the lake with a sense of caution, a deep respect for the power it holds, both real and imagined. They might acknowledge the tragedies, the stories, but ultimately choose to focus on the natural beauty and the recreational opportunities the lake offers.
So it sounds like visiting Lake Lanier is an experience that's shaped as much by personal beliefs as it is by the actual place itself.
Exactly. It's a mirror reflecting our own anxieties, our fascination with the unknown, and our desire to find meaning in the face of tragedy.
You've painted such a vivid picture of Lake Lanier, and I think you've captured something essential about its appeal. It's a place that allows us to confront our own mortality, our fears, and our beliefs about what lies beyond the realm of the tangible.
And it reminds us that even in a world that's increasingly driven by technology and logic, there are still places where mystery reigns, places that challenge our perceptions and remind us that we don't have all the answers.
You've given our listeners a lot to think about. So have you ever been to the lake yourself?
I have on several occasions, both for research purposes and for personal leisure.
What was your experience like?
Well, the first time I visited Lake Lanier, I was struck by its sheer size. It's vast, almost overwhelming. And the water, it has this peculiar stillness, a quality that I've never encountered on other lakes. It's both beautiful and unsettling,
Wow.
almost as if something is holding its breath beneath the surface.
I love that description. I can almost feel that stillness myself.
And then there's the silence. It's a heavy silence broken only by the occasional cry of a bird or the hum of a distant boat engine. It's a silence that seems to amplify every other sound, every rustle of leaves, every splash of water. It makes you hyper-aware of your surroundings,
It sounds intense.
as if you're being watched.
That's amazing. You're making me want to visit Lake Lanier myself, but maybe not alone.
That's probably a wise decision. I've always made a point of being mindful of the dangers, both the ones we can see and the ones we can't.
Right.
I wear a life jacket whenever I'm on the water, and I never venture out alone, especially after dark.
That's good advice for anyone visiting Lake Lanier, regardless of their beliefs.
Right.
Respect the lake, respect its history, and respect the power it holds.
Exactly. And maybe keep an open mind to the possibility that there are forces in play that we don't fully understand.
Okay, before we go any further, let's pause here for a moment. We've been talking a lot about the eerie side of Lake Lanier, the stories, the history,
Right.
the unexplained events, but there is another side to this story.
Yeah.
I mean, this lake, despite its reputation as a popular destination, people go there to boat, swim, fish, relax.
It is.
It's like there's a disconnect between the legend and how people experience the lake.
Right.
How do you explain that?
It's a fascinating paradox. You'd think the stories and the tragedies would keep people away, but it seems to have the opposite effect for many.
Right.
Perhaps it's the allure of the unknown,
Yeah.
the thrill of experiencing a place with such a rich and often dark history.
It reminds me of those ghost tours that you find in historic cities.
Oh, yeah?
Where people line up to hear about gruesome murders and tragic events.
Right.
There's something about confronting those darker aspects of history that seems to captivate us.
Absolutely. It's the same impulse that draws us to true crime stories, horror movies, even haunted houses at amusement parks.
Yeah.
There's a part of us that wants to confront the things that frighten us, to test the limits of our understanding and our courage.
And maybe to prove to ourselves that we don't really believe in those things, that we're too rational, too modern to be spooked by both stories and legends.
Perhaps, but I think there's also something deeper at play.
Yeah,
A recognition that the world is full of mysteries that we may never fully understand.
right.
And that's okay. In fact, embracing that uncertainty, that sense of wonder, can be incredibly enriching.
So you're saying that the endearing appeal of Lake Lanier, despite its dark side, is a testament to our need for mystery, our desire to engage with the unknown, even if it makes us a little uneasy.
Exactly. It's a reminder that logic and reason have their limits, that there are forces at play in the universe that we can't always quantify or explain.
I think you've given us the key to understanding not just Lake Lanier, but our fascination with all things mysterious and unexplained.
Yeah,
It's not about finding definitive answers, it's about the journey of exploration,
right.
the willingness to embrace the unknown and the understanding that some questions may never have neat and tidy solutions.
And that's a good thing, isn't it?
I think
The
so.
moment we think we have all the answers is the moment we stop asking questions. And that's the death of curiosity, the death of wonder.
So, what advice would you give someone who's planning to visit Lake Lanier? Someone who's intrigued by the stories but also wants to stay safe and have a respectful experience?
I would say go with an open mind and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay.
Enjoy the beauty of the lake, but respect its power. Be mindful of the history that lies beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively.
And of course, always prioritize safety, wear a life jacket, don't swim alone, and be aware of your surroundings.
Exactly. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, there are real dangers associated with any large body of water. It's important to be prepared and to take precautions.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Lake Lanier. It's a place that seems to hold a strange power, a place where beauty and tragedy are intertwined, where history whispers from beneath the surface, and where the line between reality and legend is blurred. So as you venture out into the world, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and maybe keep a safe distance from the water.